Welcome to the new and next fourth career thought leaders of careers. And we've been doing our special College Fridays for the last few months where we talk about things that students or recent grads need to know to launch their career in this recession. And today I'm excited that we have with us some of our panelists, where we have Jamie Fischer here from Novolex. Jamie, if you want to wave. So Jamie's going to be talking from a recruiter's perspective. We have Sarah Johnston, the Briefcase coach, and she's going to be talking about job search and her expertise in helping students and recent grads land jobs. And Sarah, I saw that you just had your class launch today on LinkedIn about the hidden job search. So their hidden job market. So we're excited to hear about your expertise there. And then Sarah Henning from Shiftive. And Sarah's coming with some expertise in Gen Z that might be particularly helpful for our parents and our career services professionals who are watching this, as well as expertise in job search, and I believe some recruiting in her background as well. So we're going to kick off this live by talking about what all of us were doing in the 2008 recession, because we know that there are some parallels from then to now, and students that are launching their careers in this recession are facing some of those same challenges, and of course many more that those of us who launched in 2008 didn't have to deal with. So I know Sarah and Jamie, you both also graduated in 2008. So Sarah, why don't you kick us off and share a little bit about what you were doing in 2008?
I was struggling. Just to be honest, I had gotten married right after college and relocated to a small town. And I had been a student leader, the president of a large organization on campus. And I thought because I had all these great connections and I'd done all this hard work in college, that I would land a job, no problem. And it took me several months, and I faced some depression, anxiety, and just felt at the ripe age of 22 that my entire career was over. And so there really had to be a mindset shift for me at that point.
How about you, Jamie?
Oh gosh, well, like Sarah, I was a job seeker actually in 2009. It was a little bit more complicated for me. I was just coming out of grad school. I was one of those that did my bachelor's and then thought it would be a great idea not to have any work experience at all, but just jump into another degree program. And it was a highly specialized degree to boot. So here I am coming out of grad school in 2009 with a very, very niche degree, kind of a double whammy. I was highly educated. I was competing with people in my field that were not just educated, but also experienced and living in the right city. So all of those things were really difficult for me. On top of that, not to be too somber, but my mom had just passed away. So I definitely understand, the emotional, the tumultuousness, those times that people are going through right now. And I went through that, and it was really tough. And I know everybody can relate to that. But if I can just offer a little piece of sunshine, it will be okay. Like I think I might know what I want to be when I grow up finally after all this time. And it worked out okay for me. You just have to, employ some of the strategies that we'll talk about today.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that we all have hardships and have been in that place. And
Right.
It's hard when you're in it to know
Yes.
that we'll be okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah?
Well, I was actually on the opposite side of the table of these two ladies. I was a corporate internal recruiting consultant in the finance industry. So if you remember, the last recession was all centered around the implosion, I would say, of the finance world and everything that had to do really with more so mortgages kind of being the tipping point for that. So luckily I worked in the personal financial planning arena with a Fortune 500 company, but we were looking at how do we quickly pivot, not only to support the financial advisors that were out in the field working with people during the recession, but also pivot our recruiting strategy and hire the right talent in as we continue to grow the organization and the firm. And specifically, my job was to help work with recruiters nationally to make sure that they were trained and up to speed and have the tools and resources they need to find that top talent, both for people that were coming into our company who had several years of experience, but also through the internship program that they ran and hiring people right off the college campus. So it was an interesting and chaotic time in terms of what my job entailed. But I felt lucky about being on the other side of the table, because when I hear about what Sarah and Jamie were saying about what the emotional part of their experience was, I felt like I was in a really lucky position to come in and reassure people, being able to be outside of it, reassure them that it was going to all be okay. And we be able to be a helpful hand to help them through it in a lot of capacities. So I think that's what a lot of us on the call today, that's really the position we're in, right? Is in this current economic state and the craziness of the world that we're facing right now. That's the benefit of being the position we're in. We get to reassure them and provide guidance. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think back. So I graduated with my undergrad in 2003, and that was a great market, right? I think historically, if you look back, or maybe not great, but things were pretty good. And I struggled because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was in the university environment. I'd been working in the university. So I think that there's part of this that when we graduate, a lot of us struggle regardless of the economy just adding another layer of struggle. I was a psychology graduate, and I went to my first job fair right before I graduated. And I remember kind of walking around and talking to people that were hiring psychology majors. And I was like, I don't want any of these jobs. Like, how did this not connect for me the whole time I was going through college? So obviously that's why we love our career service providers. And some of them are watching this because you are trying to make sure that that doesn't happen for our students, that they aren't like me and they graduate and go, oh, that just didn't work out. So in 2008, I was working at the university environment, had finally gotten into careers. And in 2008, actually graduated with my master's in counseling and career development. And once you find that passion, it is so much easier to navigate that piece of it. I actually left the university in September of 2008 to start my business, and didn't really have to miss a beat, even because of the recession. One, because I happened to be in the careers field in a recession, which there was jobs and work there to do, especially at the workforce centers. But two, because I knew what I wanted to do, and I had that focus, and I could navigate and find the opportunities. And three, because I'd been making so little money at the university that it really didn't take much for my business to match that income. So let's start off. And Sarah, you were going to start off by sharing some of the insights you have about Generation Z and what they're facing, what that looks like for them right now.
Yeah, so I've started, when I launched my business, consulting to organizations about their talent acquisition and building out really high yield internship programs. I was really focusing a lot on millennials, and I'm an elder millennial, as Eliza Schlesinger labeled us. So I'm on the higher end of that cusp. But I definitely resonate with being, I call those of us that are on that cuspers, right? Because what tends to happen in any generation is you take on characteristics of both. So as an elder millennial, I take on millennial and Gen X traits. Our current Gen Zers coming out of college, who've left a couple years ago and really kind of are in college right now, they're going to be cuspers between Gen Z and millennials. So some of what we've seen from millennials will continue to be true for some of these people. But what we are starting to see is that they are taking on a lot more of the characteristics of their parents, the Gen Xers. So where millennials tend to be more collaborative and team-based driven, Gen Zers, we know, are more independent and competitive. And they really want, I saw, there's a great article that was published in 2018 by Sherm that was what a 16-year-old wants you to know about Gen Z. And it was based off of research from XYZ University. And one of his key first points is Gen Z always knows the score, which means they're competitive and they want to win and they know what that looks like and they're not afraid to go after it. But what I love about this generation is the counterpoint to that is that they also are very socially driven. They are very connected in terms of building community in a lot of different ways. And they're very, they're so diverse they don't even recognize diversity. I'm borrowing that phrase from that article as well, because I just think there's no better way of saying it. They're so diverse they don't even recognize the diversity. Now, obviously, we're confronting what that really means right now in our society and what that actually looks like. But I think the important part of that is that the people who are really confronting it are probably millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers, almost more so than the Gen Zers. So what's great about that from like a hiring standpoint and from interacting with them on job searches and kind of getting them ready is if you can identify an end game, there doesn't have to be as much hand-holding on how to get there. If you can say, here are tools and resources, and let's identify what your end goal is and put some framework around that, like timelines and general mastery skills and principles as they're kind of like getting ready to go out there and find jobs, they're going to understand that, or they're going to have a desire to really grab on and take hold of those tools, resources, and sort of framework and pathways forward to find their career, to build it out, to get connected in their network, to find, opportunities for internships and jobs after graduation. So I've seen that specifically. And Sarah and Jamie, I'd love to hear from all of you actually, if you've seen anything different. But in this last pandemic, I would say, I actually think the pandemic is going to serve Gen Z and career services professionals very well. Because of these traits of Gen Z, I saw a massive shift from, I need you to hold my hand and show me what to do, to, oh no, I got to figure this out fast. And what are my resources and how am I connecting to make sure I can still have the internship if possible? If I can't have the internship, what am I going to do this summer to learn, to grow, develop? Reaching out to people in various networks. I saw a huge increase on LinkedIn connectivity and activity from college age students, which we've seen trending that way for the last several years. But I think that this pandemic has been sort of a very big awakening of what we've always known as career professionals, which is your career development path is as good as you are at owning it, not waiting for other people to do things for you. So that's kind of what I've been seeing with Gen Z, and specifically in the last several months as we've transitioned off of campus to remote learning and into what does exist as summer internships in 2020.
Career service. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was just going to say, and maybe ask Jamie and Sarah and Maria if you've seen the same thing. I've loved seeing these new graduates who have found themselves without jobs or internships own their voice on social media. I've seen a number of them use content to demonstrate their thought leadership. And I've seen blogs. I've seen people starting to create their own content on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And I think it really sets them apart and differentiates them, which is really a strength of this generation.
Absolutely.
I would agree. And I've seen students maybe more on an interpersonal level, not so much, not everyone is a content creator, and that's okay. But on an interpersonal level, go out and seek somebody like me, a talent acquisition manager or a recruiter in a company, and say, hey, I know you told me your internship program this summer isn't going to work out, but I just want to let you know I'm a resource if I can have an informational session with somebody in your company, or, think outside the box to still draw a connection. And I've seen a lot more of that than I have in the past too, which speaks to Sarah's point.
Yeah, so this comment's kind of covering up a few faces here for just a second, but Paul is agreeing with you all that they are going to be forced into thinking about entrepreneurship. And I think all generations right now are, but Gen Z launching kind of to, that point of my 2008 story, they won't have the expectations that maybe some other generations graduating classes have had. And there's a struggle to that. There's also a freedom to it because they won't be making $60,000 out of the gate, and they will learn how to do it differently.
I think an interesting aspect of Gen Z and I'm sorry, was Paul the person who made that comment? To Paul's point, I agree 100% about the entrepreneurship piece, but in a very interesting twist. Gen Z grew up seeing the side hustle creating financial stability. And that is because millennials, and the experience that Sarah and Jamie had was, I don't know if I'm entering the workforce and I don't know if I can count on the workforce for providing for me what I need. Gen Zers, probably their first conversations about money, for some of them could have been, will we be able to pay our mortgage? Our grandma and grandpa having to go back to work because retirement disappeared. Oh no, so-and-so has to move out of the neighborhood because they lost their job and they can't afford their, like, it was scary conversations about money as they were very, very early being introduced into financial concepts. So that desire to I read a study, I'm going to get the stat wrong, but it was like something like 20% of the kids who were 16 to 18 who had been interviewed had already started saving for retirement. This was 2 years ago. Whoa. So this is a very financially conscious group because of how they were born. And that side hustle is something that has been critical for kind of what they've seen adults have to do as they build their career, but also totally accessible because they see how businesses are being built on social media. That's a native platform for them to connect and communicate.
Sure.
Sarah, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was going to throw in, I heard this term that aligns with what you're saying called a slash career. Like, I'm a career counselor / recruiter / X. And it's like more common now for people to wear multiple hats and not just fall into one pathway. And I think that you're going to absolutely see this with this generation.
Yeah. It's interesting because the stat I hated the most about millennials when we talked about the workforce was that they were saying for a while there, and it's probably true, that the average 30-year-old was going to have 11 jobs between graduation and the time they were 30. And I was like, yeah, I'm one of those people actually, because I had 2 to 3 jobs and I worked for the same company for the first 10 years of my career and progressed through it in a very traditional sense. And I still had these other jobs that I kept because I wanted to keep exploring, is this my forever career? Can I augment my income? Can I turn a passion into a job and a career? So I was one of those people that had a ton of jobs on my resume and probably had a lot of jobs, but also was fully employed by the same company during that entire time as well.
And I think to your point, we can do this class of 2020 a favor by making it okay to change jobs if they need to. Yes. There was so much pressure on me and my generation to stay in a job for a long time. And like, there was all the media talked about how bad it was to job hop, and they made millennials out to be just horrible at job hopping. But the reality is we were underpaid and we were underworking because of the time that we graduated. We need to make it acceptable for people to upskill and move on if they find a better opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember talking to my sister. So I worked at Colorado State, but that job ended. So I was working at DU and I was driving an hour and sometimes 3 hours because of traffic every day to work. And I would call my sister on the phone and I'd be crying in the car and say, like, I've got to quit this job. And she said, Marie, you can't quit that job. You know, you can't be that job hopper. You just moved. And then I got back to Colorado State and I was in a really bad job. I was in accounting. I was in an accounting job when I first started at Colorado State. And same thing. I'd talk to my sister or my mom and be like, oh, I can't do this job anymore. And they'd be like, oh, you got to stay there, right? So exactly, that we don't have to stay there. We can move around and we can get where we need to go. So Jamie, you've got some experience on the other side of the desk right now. Talk to us a little bit about what recruiters are seeing. Uh-oh, did we lose her?
Oh, she froze.
Well, Sarah, why don't you go and then we'll circle back around.
Okay, great. So you want me to answer from the career perspective of what job seekers are looking at?
Yeah. So what is your top job search advice for these class of 2020 grads?
I'm finding that historically, a lot of college grads, I think the stat was around 40% waited until graduation to start job searching. And that's going to come back and bite some people. Those job seekers who were proactive at the beginning and maybe who got jobs or internships and lost the opportunity already have a leg up because now they are tapping into their networks early. They're leveraging the fact that they had a job and they lost that opportunity, and people are feeling for them and they're being a lot more generous and a lot more helpful. So, that is one thing that I'm seeing that's going to be hurtful. The other thing that I'm seeing is this group of class of 2020, the students that I'm seeing, that I'm working with, are really resourceful, and they're connecting with people, they're having conversations. And I think that that's so important. If you can encourage your students to build out that target list of companies that they'd like to work for and really think through what their options are, and then also think about their network. And one thing I've learned from Sarah Henning is just the power of centers of influence. And so think through and have your students work through this exercise of thinking through everyone that they know. And sometimes it's the people that, your mom's hairdresser sister, who could be the most helpful. And so encouraging those students not to overlook those contacts.
That's so true, that we talked on Tuesday about the shape of the network and all of the different circles that people might have. And then in the past weeks, we've had some university career services professionals on talking about the work they're doing in their alumni network. And to your point, if students create that list of target companies, then they can use that to talk to their career services providers and connect with alumni in those companies.
Absolutely. And I think people who have jobs are feeling a little guilty that they have a job and they want to give back. And so if you can encourage a student to help someone help them, alumni who are employed are a lot more willing to have conversations because they are feeling this generosity of being in this together.
Yeah, Jamie's back.
Hey, sorry guys. A challenge of our world today when you don't have perfect Wi-Fi. It happens to me at least once a day. So sorry. I wanted to just jump in. Previously, you guys were talking about ideas or strategies or mindsets for jumping into the new workforce. Something that helped me, and I know this is several years ago in 2009, but something that helped me, and people talk about this all the time, Sarah, I know that you do, but somebody told me to just let go and to just chill out and stop applying for everything. And I really did listen to that. I started to have fun. I joined a local soccer league because I love soccer. And I know this sounds like a made up story, but I met one of my best friends playing soccer. She offered me a position in a law firm, which was in no way related to what I had studied. And I took a position as a legal assistant, which was what I call my leg up position. And I learned so much from that experience that I never expected. And so I want to say, just be open to something that may be a little bit different than the path that you prepared for yourself originally.
Mm-hmm.
How many of you have a job right now related to your major in college? I don't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I tell people all the time to that point, Jamie. I tell college students all the time, the biggest misconception that we have is that our career path is linear, and it's really a plate of spaghetti. It is. Really it's just not linear. So right. I think that is such great advice. Just be open. Yeah.
And mine was completely by mistake, right? I graduated with psychology. I had no idea what to do with it. And then 5 years later, got into my master's program. But yeah, it may happen, but it definitely doesn't happen. And it usually doesn't happen right away.
Certainly, there are obviously those careers where you have to have a degree and it sets you on a very specific track. Don't want to discredit any of that. But I think for a lot of people, you think about what do you think your life's going to look like? And you get to I just had my 15-year college reunion, and it was so incredible. These people that I had classes with, hearing what they're doing now and how they're impacting the world and growing their careers. And it was really fun because it was different for a lot of people than I would have guessed. So. Yeah.
Anyone want to take this one? Maybe Sarah, how do people show it on their resume if they got a job but then had it rescinded?
I love this question, Anne. And honestly, this isn't something that I have previously considered. My advice would be to have networking conversations where you explain it, or maybe you explain it in a cover letter. Although it is a very prestigious opportunity and one that you went through a very strenuous recruitment process, you might want to mention that due to COVID budget cuts, the position was eliminated, and you can mention the opportunity or the fellowship. What do you think, Marie?
Yeah, I think you do look at what was it? Is it really relevant? Was it hard to get? Was it prestigious? Then you could put on the resume, selected for, this position, this competitive role, and that it was eliminated. So I could see that if there was some of that prestige around it or selection or something that made it kind of special, we could put that on the resume. Otherwise, I think it's leveraging it in the networking, maybe even leveraging out on LinkedIn. So I could see putting it on LinkedIn specifically, because then you can connect to people that maybe are working there. So I think it would, as always on a resume, depend on the situation and what that looks like. Using it in networking, talking to that company to see if there's a way to transition that into an internship, maybe even an unpaid internship, just so you could put it on your resume with a little bit more detail. A lot of navigating there that students are trying to do on their own. And don't forget, if you are the parent or a student, that you've got a career services office and coaches there that can help you if you need some help navigating that challenging conversation.
Another idea that just came to my mind is putting it maybe in, if you're doing like a networking one pager in addition to the resume. So if you're doing informational interviews and you're having conversations with people, it could go on the networking resume what the role was, and then in terms of the targets that you're trying to get that are similar to that position. So that could be something that you could do as well.
Yeah, I want to pick up that thread. Sorry, Marie.
Yeah,
I just want to pick up that thread as somebody who works in talent acquisition. If you were, to call that recruiter who hired you and unfortunately had to rescind the offer and just say, well, I would love if you could make any referrals for me. We do that a lot in my industry. Specifically me, when I say we, I do that a lot. I do network with other people that work in my industry and share available talent. So that's an avenue that they could take as well. I think there was a too.
I said you're a superstar. I think you're exceptional. But
yeah, and I don't know if you have any thoughts, Jamie, about what you would think if you saw someone put a job that they never did, a job offer into their experience section.
I think that's credible. Yeah, I think that's credible, because what that tells me as somebody in talent acquisition is that person can obtain something that's difficult to obtain. They have great communication skills. They have something to be desired. So I think that's a good idea, especially if it's a really nice opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember seeing this in 2008 when we had people that were losing jobs. I think to acknowledge two things: everything you've mentioned, and if there is a gap in employment, why it's there. I do think it's especially important for college students because of what Sarah was saying earlier, which is the disadvantage for people who waited to find a job. That's going to be challenging for them. But to be honest, it always has been for college students that have waited. It's just an extra layer of challenge. And I think when we're looking at people that are coming right out of graduation and now don't have a job, it helps a recruiter or a hiring team say, oh, this person had a job. It's not that they were just sitting there waiting for something to happen. It's that the world happened to them in this scenario. I think it's something. I saw the question of put it under experience. I guess Sarah, I would defer to you. Like, what's the right part of the resume to denote it under? In my mind, I would put it under. I would put it right there under experience so that people understand. But
yeah, I think that would be the appropriate place if you're listing it on your resume or just on the cover letter.
Yeah,
and that distinction of, is it a prestigious opportunity or one in line with what you're looking for?
Yeah,
absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, and Cheryl's saying, how will the ATS look at it? I don't know that it's going to necessarily factor into that because it wasn't actually experience. In fact, I'd kind of play around with it as, do you even include a date, because you're saying it was offered, but it didn't happen. So I don't know that it would play into that. It would just be a line item to, as you're saying, Jamie and Sarah, kind of communicate that, yes, I did search, I did find something, it just didn't happen.
And I guess for college kids, a lot of times we see work history and then relevant experience. They could also probably put it under that relevant experience category, or, where they've got volunteer work or athletics or student organizations there. And that might be another good spot to pop it in if they need to.
Yeah. So Jamie, share with us a little bit more about what you're seeing on the recruiting side and what students can do to stand out, recent graduates can do to stand out and their applications.
Sure. So I do a lot of recruiting across the board, mostly management and supervisory level positions, but we do hire recent graduates as well. That is still happening. We're still doing interviews for positions like that. In fact, I am building out a search for one just this morning. So there are definitely students or graduates applying for our positions. I wanted to touch on that ATS question real quick that was posed right before you asked that, to say, it doesn't really matter how it's communicated, in my opinion. This is my opinion only, but We don't take every little tiny detail on a resume or in the applicant tracking system into account. We just basically want to see the content. So if there's no end date for that, that's fine. We want to dig for a little bit more information. In terms of how to guide people in their applications, if they're a new student, I really like a cover letter. That's one of my favorite things, especially for deciphering how you meet the requirements. My favorite is the 2-column cover letter. And again, this is just my opinion. There are a million opinions on this, but I like the one that addresses some of the main requirements in a position. And then I like when that recent grad will actually plug in how they meet those requirements in a cover letter and maybe address, why they want the position. Just something that's simple. It doesn't have to regurgitate everything on the resume, but just to draw that in for a recruiter, I think that really helps a lot.
And when they interview, anything in particular, and this may not just be with recent grads, but what stands out to you when someone interviews, especially in this virtual world? Are you doing Zoom interviews? Share with us a little bit about what an interview looks like today for you.
Absolutely. We're doing a ton of, we use GoToMeeting interviews, but in terms of interviewing, the first thing to say, just some real simple tips. I have to say, I interview a lot of intern applicants and a lot of students or recent grads that are just not good at interviewing. And I expect that because they probably don't interview a lot. But simple things, the number one thing that shocks me, people don't do research before they speak to somebody on an interview. It blows my mind. Just do a little bit of research. If somebody asks you, do you know what my company makes? Your answer should be, yes, I have an idea. And just one sentence of their understanding, that'd be really helpful. That will put students above the cut. It's something that simple. Another simple thing people can do is they can answer the phone better. I preach this a lot, but instead of just a resting, disinterested hello, answer the phone, with your name and sound bright and cheery. That's something that's simple. It sets people apart. And then I think, the thing that's a lot more difficult when teaching people how to interview effectively is to help students tell their story more concisely, more with humanity, and Sarah's really good at coaching those principles. But I think those 3 things mainly: do your research, answer the phone clearly with your name, and then be able to tell your story in an effective manner. That should really set students far apart from the rest.
I love those. I'll add, I recently got a question from a student who sent me an email, and he said, I'm being asked to do all this extra work for the interview. They want me to work for free. Is that okay? And maybe you're seeing this. No, well, I kind of have a unique perspective on this. I think it's unethical for the company to ask the candidate to do a lot of free work. I think it has to be manageable, but I think companies are getting flooded with applicants. And they have to find a way to differentiate the resumes because, let's be honest, most college student resumes look pretty similar. So especially in the marketing field where you're posting an entry-level marketing position, you want to see what people can do. And so for students, I think it's okay to do some free work to prove that you can do the work and that you're capable and you don't need a lot of hand-holding, because this is not the time to ask for training programs. Companies are running really lean right now. That being said, I do think it could be helpful for you in career services to help your students develop boundaries and know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Yeah, I got to tell you. So when I was at the university, I hired someone and they said, oh yeah, I know how to use Excel and blah, 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 blah. Well, then we sat down on their first day of the job and I said, okay, let's build a spreadsheet. And I said, okay, move to the next cell. And she looked at me and said, well, how do I do that? So if I was going to hire someone today, I would be making them do something to show me that they knew how to do that, because I kept been burned. It's way too easy to just say, yes, I know how to do that. Right.
So I have a perfect follow-up. Yeah. Sorry, Maria. Perfect follow-up to you right now. When I'm searching for a new graduate, it's usually a very niche position. Like I have a trade compliance specialist right now. It's very niche, but I will go out on LinkedIn. So get everybody's information on LinkedIn. That's huge. And I will actually run a search. So I use very specific skills, not just Excel. I would write in my skill search pivot tables if that's what I'm searching for. So another really excellent point to share with you: have your students be very specific about the skills that they possess on their LinkedIn profile, because that helps recruiters a lot. They will be found that way.
Right, and you can use the skills tests. Do you ever use the skills tests in LinkedIn where people can kind of demonstrate their skills in those tests?
We do. It's rare in my position, but yes, that does happen. Absolutely.
So that's another thing that students can do is take some of those tests so that those show up on their profile.
I know Sarah wants to say something.
Yes, Sarah? No,
Yeah,
I was agreeing with you. I thought that was great. Great advice. I'm nodding my head because I'm learning.
Well, I actually had a job seeker who's a new grad get a job during COVID, a very competitive marketing position, because they interviewed, and after the interview, they sent a follow-up email, and they said, and also, by the way, I looked at your blog, and I made my own blog post that aligns with the work that you're doing, and just did it on their own. And Austin Belchak, who writes a lot of content on LinkedIn, he coined this phrase, the value validation project, which is just kind of taking that step beyond what they're asking of you and demonstrating what you can do. And I think that's so smart, because companies, again, are running really lean right now. The managers are tied in a lot of different directions, and you want a self-starter, that you want a student who can prove their value and is a self-starter. And so if you can encourage your students to do that, that would be helpful.
I also think those I like that term, value validation projects, give you an advantage when it comes to the compensation discussion and being able to negotiate. I think that when you can show and prove value specifically tied to the organization, their objectives, or a challenge that they're having, right? That's the best work you can do. If in the interview process you discover there's a pain point or a problem they're working on right now, and you can say, based on what I've learned and what I know and some research that I've done, here's a potential solution to that problem. I think then it differentiates you, and also gives you a point of reference to show that value when it comes to time to accept the offer and negotiate compensation.
I agree. And
Which
you can add that.
I still think you should do, even in a recession. I really do.
100%. There's a budget for that role. You can negotiate.
Absolutely.
To add to your value validation, something that's really simple in an interview that students can work on. Again, I should have said this the first time, but you prompted me. When you're asked, why are you interested in this opportunity? That's a key moment for you to show your value. That's a key moment for you to show that you actually know what the company does, because that's why you applied for this position, because you're really passionate about it. So the more clearly your students can speak to why they're interested, the more they will prove their value. That is such a hugely important question. All my hiring managers want me to ask it, and they don't like answers like, well, I matched the job description. Next. Like that's a very generic answer. So just think through why. There must be something pulling you into that application beyond, I know we need a job. That does exist, but there's got to be something beyond there that's exciting enough for you to apply for that position. It can be something simple, as long as it's genuine. That's going to really help.
Well, thank you all for sharing your insights, and we've got some great conversation going in the chat. Cheryl and Paul and Linda talking about how they would put this in a resume. So thank you for sharing that, and this is great information that students, recent grads, can use to launch their career, not just right now, but I know we'll have students graduating in December, and it'll be a whole new group of people that will probably face very similar challenges. So thank you for sharing this, and Jamie and Sarah for doing the work that you do to help people move forward in their careers. We will be back here again next Tuesday with another live, but this is the last of our College Fridays. So you all ended it on an excellent note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend.